Are you confused about the economy? Well, have no fear. I'm going to explain the American economy right now. The dollar, just think of it like a promise from the government, but the value of the dollar has to be there to be relevant. The value of the dollar comes from China and Iran when they put the cash reserves in a U.S. dollar plan. They bought treasury bonds from the Federal Reserve. We say we owe you extra money because you gave us some of yours. That's a big part of the national debt. All the interest that we haven't paid to China quite yet, and 100 other countries because we're such a good investment. The whole gives us money. We say, hey, we'll pay you interest. This is how money is created from air. Bank bailout, federal budget money isn't really there. It's an IOU. Remember, dollars are promised. When you borrow from a bank, it's not from other depositors. The money for your loan gets created on the spot. Then they put it in your name, gamble on your life and body. But if you lose your job, then you were a bad bet. If a million lose their jobs, then we have a recession. Here's the dirty secret. Your labor's too expensive. Wall Street wants you spending money, but they never want to pay you. In your life, cash and credit, they are very different things. But you credit someone else's cash once it leaves your name. This is why money is debt, and your debt is good for Wall Street prosperity and economic growth since the 1970s. As consumers getting credit without wages increasing. So when they talk about the housing crisis, they never say we need to lower housing prices. We need better devices to avoid high prices, meaning higher debt, lower interest because you're underpaid to begin with. That's the cycle we're in. We don't understand, so all we can do is question. Mama, economy make me understand all the numbers. Why daddy's on a welfare plan, turning 30, 40, 50. Gotta move in with my parents and the stocks go up, but the jobs disappear. Yeah, mama, economy make me understand all the numbers. Why daddy's on a welfare plan, turning 30, 40, 50. Gotta move in with my parents and the stocks go up, but the jobs disappear because wages barely grew for 40 years. When you buy stuff, they delay the cost of ownership. You can't afford it, so they make it to depend on in the small transactions, which is like renting. You pay more for printer ink than you do for gold, and more for bottled water than you do for oil. Razor blades are made to oxidate, so you're forever in debt to them just to shave. It's a type of socialism called market socialism. The best designed product meets your need and doesn't last. We subsidize waste with landfills and holidays like Earth Day, teaching kids recycle please. But kids don't learn in school. We live one worldview, neoliberal economics and all of their politics. They don't ask what corporations are human citizens. Or our grandma pays more taxes because she likes that dividend. Or our private bankers print the public money. Or our democracy is broken because their leaders won't be cutting loopholes and subsidies for constituent industries, putting legislative bodies in a deep freeze. So the PhDs and the GEDs cry with Ayn Rand down at the temp agency, saying we believed in meritocracy, but there's more to the story. Answer me, mama, economy make me understand all the numbers. Why daddy's on a welfare plan, turning 30, 40, 50. Gotta move in with my parents and the stocks go up, but the jobs disappear. Yeah, mama, economy make me understand all the numbers. Why daddy's on a welfare plan, turning 30, 40, 50. Gotta move in with my parents and the stocks go up, but the jobs disappear. Mama, economy make me understand all the numbers. Why daddy's on a welfare plan, turning 30, 40, 50. Gotta move in with my parents and the stocks go up, but the jobs disappear.
Hello, good day to wherever you all are. You're listening to Axiom Flux News. I'm PJ, I'm joined with STAV. On today's date, the 8th of November 2015, you're just listening to Mama Economy by Tay Zonde. Check him up on YouTube, does some good stuff. So welcome, thanks for joining. Tonight's Flux News will be discussing the economy, or if you want to break it down, eco, no my, which is my, no, eco, backwards. But make as much sense of that as you can. So tonight we're going to be breaking it down, going into detail from two different viewpoints, myself and STAVs. We're going to see what we can produce and present. But before we do that, I'd just like to welcome Stav to the show. Hello, Stav. How are you doing?
Evening, PJ. Yeah, fine.
Right.
Yeah, you?
Yeah, doing good. I've got a bit of a sore throat, bad chest, but hopefully we can accomplish this Flux news.
It must have something to do with the economy. Oh, sorry, the weather.
No worries. So, what have you got for us tonight? Anything interesting?
Well, if we could try and sort out the economy, we'd be running the country. But it's all BS, isn't it? Really. I mean, I've just picked up. Anybody can just put UK economy in the Google search, and you can come up with the wiki page, and it just gives you. It looks a little bit, all this, that, and all these numbers and bits and pieces, but this is their figures, so to speak, and give you some idea. GDP rank, GDP growth, and all this business. But if you really look down, you can look at the really interesting stuff. We say, well, how have they balanced this all out? Is there anything really in that little, that little red briefcase the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Mr. Frogspawn, comes out with every year?
Oh yeah, the red one that was once black.
Yeah, there's nothing in it, guys. There's nothing in the case, just in case you didn't know.
Wait, there is. You're wrong, Andy. There's thin air. Don't underestimate the power of thin air.
It's worth a lot of money.
Money?
Thin air is money. Listen, promissory notes and all the rest of it. Thin air is money. So anyway, if we just look at the silly little things they say, well, this is how we balance it out. You see, this is how it's done. Look, if we look at exports, okay, this is 2014 exports. We export. Apparently, they, us, everyone, this country exported $503 billion worth of exports of one. Wonder what that could be. Well, okay. I mean, in the old days, you'd probably say Sheffield Steel, gas, oil, whatever.
So it's goods and services we're speaking about, yeah?
Wow, I was just going to get there. I mean, perhaps, double it up with furniture or metal crafts, all sorts of things, that the shipbuilders, shipping, all the stuffs that used to be in the great industrial north, and they had all these shipyards and everything, loads and loads of things that we used to make. I think actually in 1971, the town that you're close to, or the town that you know quite well, put it that way, Sheffield, I think the 50% of the working population worked in manufacture. Now it's down to about, I think it's about 13%, 10%, something like that, something ridiculous like that. So obviously the manufacturing side of it is completely up and running. But so anyway, so I'd like to know what is being exported at $503 billion a year. Well, I think that most people will know what that would be. And then we check imports. Oh look, $782.5 trillion imports. So there's a mismatch here of $280 billion. So we're importing $280 billion more than we export. So the government said, well, we've got that to pick up.
Based on two different years, 2013 and 2014, yeah?
Yeah, but it would have been probably higher in 2014 because it progressed. Apparently, we would have imported even more because that's the economy. Basically, consumerism is a big part of the economy. Okay, so anyway, but if we just take those, I didn't actually, to be honest, PJ, I thought that was 2014. So you're much more observant than me. So, but anyway, you get the.
I'm no economist, Andy, but I know numbers when I see them.
Yeah, neither am I. I'm just going through this jungle of the economy, and because people look at these things, I don't want to read them. I ain't got a clue what it's about, this, that, and the other. So basically, if we go, the top country we export to is Switzerland.
Octagon?
Yes, why aren't we exporting to Germany? I mean, well, we can't do that because we obviously have to import more from Germany than we export to Germany. So there you go. We buy more off them than we sell to them. And second, imports is obviously China, which Germany's the highest. Some people might be surprised at those two. But anyway, the reason why I'm sort of getting all into this is to sort of try and stitch.
What's more surprising, that China doesn't buy anything from us? or what? Or that Switzerland seems to be the most keen?
Absolutely, Jack, you know. And that's actually got even worse than Jack, apparently. But anyway, what is it that you know? What is it that? Where are we? I'm trying to find the list of budget deficit revenues public. It was here. The services. What our economy is. Well, unfortunately, I seem to have lost that link. I'm sure it was on here somewhere. But anyway, never mind. Apparently, the gross GDP is 2.945 trillion. And that was 2015. Well, we haven't finished 2015, so I don't know where they get that from. But anyway, looking down here at some of these things, right, GDP per capita, quite important, because basically the average person's worth to the country per year, if I've got that right, is $46,244 a year. Okay. Are you worth that much, PJ? Do you generate that amount, or?
Not that I know of.
Do you get paid that amount?
I sure don't.
But there was. I'm trying to find this link. It's the most important link here, actually. But I'm buggered if main industry.
Quite possibly is. But normally that's the way it works. The most important links don't get discovered.
Right. Anyway, it does actually tell you here somewhere what is the what we're actually.
Is it there, the GDP?
No, it's basically what it's made up of what part. Service sector. When I can find it, it's basically it's basically the service sector is almost 80% of the economy. Okay, the service sector gets apparently paid out in taxes that people earn, and that's what keeps the service sector going, basically. So it's 80%. All the rest.
Would it come under economic data, statistical information?
Where's that, PJ?
Number 2 in that contents box. On left-hand side, a bit in middle towards bottom of your page. Yeah.
What, here?
Yeah. Economic data.
Could be.
No.
We've got some silly business going on here. Anyway.
I know what you're talking about, yeah. But it'd be good if we could get the information displayed on screen for viewers.
Well, that's right. It would be. What a shame. Maybe we can
find it. You can always return to it, yeah.
Yeah, I think that might be the case. We might have to do that. Sorry about that, guys.
Either that, or I can show a piece of mine while you're finding it. It's up to you.
Yeah, can do if you like.
All right, no worries. I'll let you find that then.
Okay.
And hopefully, if I've got myself in gear. Okay, I'm not going to go into too much. I'm just going to brief cover this while you're finding that. So, for the viewers that aren't well aware on certain, terms of words and what they mean, I'm just going to show you a couple. Now, I'm no expert, and I don't claim to be. I'm just simply presenting a little bit of evidence and information and things like that, so you guys can get a better understanding. And hopefully one day you can come back and help me. But this is how it is. So capitalism, according to this website, economist.com, the winner, at least for now, of the battle of economic isms. Capitalism is a free market system built on private ownership. In particular, the idea that owners of capital have property rights that entitle them to earn a profit as a reward for putting their capital at risk in some form of economic activity. Opinion differs considerably among capitalist countries about what role the state should play in the economy, but everybody agrees that, at the very least, for capitalism to work, the state must be strong enough to guarantee property rights. According to Karl Marx, capitalism contains the seeds of its own destruction, but so far this has proved a more accurate description of Marx's progeny, communism. So now I'm going to do a little brief readout on communism. According to this website, it says the enemy of capitalism and now nearly extinct, invented by Karl Marx, who predicted that feudalism and capitalism would be succeeded by the dictatorship of the proletariat, during which the state would wither away and economic life would be organized to achieve from each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. The Soviet Union was the most prominent attempt to put communism into practice, and the result was conspicuous failure. Although some modern followers of Marx reckon that the Soviets missed the point. So for those that don't know about Karl Marx, I'm not going to go into it. I'm just going to quickly show you this website. A few little things that it's got on. Basically, this website is just a breakdown of words and tells you what meanings are in certain terms. Karl Marx, much followed and much misunderstood German economist from 1818 to 1883. His two best-known works were the Communist Manifesto, written in 1848 with Friedrich Engels, and Das Kapital, in 4 volumes published between 1867 and 1910. Most of his economic assumptions were drawn from orthodox classical economics. So I'm not even going to go any further than this, because this is something that can continue and constantly roll. But hopefully we'll check back with Stav now to see if he's recovered his important link.
No, not yet.
Not yet.
I don't know.
Well,
it's actually disappeared.
Ad-lib, I shall continue if need be.
Okay, you carry on, PJ.
No worries. Okay, so we'll go a bit more into this Karl Marx guy, because he is an interesting character. Some things you probably weren't spot on with, but some things you struggle to argue with it, with what you see going off in the world today. So, we're going to be discussing a few things tonight, and hopefully a few solutions to a few things, or at least put a few out. We're not saying that they're going to work. We're just saying that it's an alternative way of thinking, just like this guy Karl Marx did, and so many others. So I will go into my first article, which is, I did really want to save it till Stav finished his, but I'll start it now. So this is the myth of the 1970s. In the 1970s, they say the dead lay unburied. Greedy unions held the country to ransom, and a divided country was impossible to govern. And that's John Medhurst asks, was it really so bad? This is an article taken from redpepper.org.uk, dated October 2014. So here's a myth. Britain was in economic crisis and decline in the 1970s. The reasons the British economy was in difficulty in the 1970s had little to do with the welfare state, or nationalised industries, but reflected the failures of British capitalism. Since 1945, European countries such as France, Italy and Germany, as well as Japan, had outstripped Britain in productivity and economic growth. This was due to the sustained and governed, planned and supported investment those countries put into their industries. In contrast, Britain was badly served by the city and its financial institutions. Give you $1 for naming the city, Andy. Which prioritised short-term profits, immediate shareholder return and overseas investment. As a result, there was a decline of UK industry. Labour's industrial strategy in the 1970s aimed to provide greater strategic direction and investment through a national enterprise board, planning agreements and targeted regional investment. The City and Conservative Party opposed this. Analysts such as Alan Bailey, Treasury Under Secretary in 1973 to 79, writing about Labour's industrial policies of the 1970s, concluded that its attempt at an activist industrial strategy was more positive and successful than is accepted in the prevailing caricature of the period. As for other economic indicators such as inflation, there were particular causes which the 1974 to 79 Labour government inherited from its Tory predecessor, and which it had some success in dealing with, resulting in inflation having between 1976 and 1979. So, the myth. In the 1970s, Britain was an ungovernable failed state. Britain was so far from being a failed state in the 1970s that a survey by the New Economics Foundation based on social inequality, indices investment in public services, levels of pay and other benefits to ordinary workers, found that in 1976 was the happiest year in the period 1945 to today. There were major advances on sexual equality, such as the Equal Pay Act, the Domestic Violence and Matrimonial Proceedings Act, child benefit. Britain in the 1970s was also characterised by vibrant and original popular music, design and fashion industries. Although there were significant miners' strikes in 72 and 74, and the so-called Winter of Discontent disputes in 78 and 79. These arose from legitimate wage grievances as trade unions tried to ensure their members' pay kept pace with inflation. The strikes were lawful industrial actions and were accompanied by 3 general elections, February and October 1974 and March 1979, in which political power changed hands peacefully and constitutionally. The main threat to British democracy in the 1970s arose from the activities of the political right and the security services. Unaccountable elements in the security services and military intelligence created covert operations such as Clockwork Orange, which smeared left-wing figures in Northern Ireland and Britain, as well as providing Protestant paramilitaries with the names and addresses of Catholic activists. Paramilitary organisations such as the GB-75, which sought to organise strike-breaking armies and prepare for a possible military coup, were supported by senior figures in the security services. The military and the Conservative Party, many on the right, including Margaret Thatcher, supported General Pinch's 1973 military coup, which removed Chile's democratically elected socialist government and murdered thousands of its supporters. Inflation was out of control in the 1970s because of the trade union pay demands, is the next myth. Inflation went up considerably between 72 and 1976. When it began to go back down, it was mainly driven by the the government's relaxation of the Bank of England's competition and credit control rules, which had ensured that the ratio of bank deposits to lending should broadly balance out. Without these controls, the banks expanded their reserve assets to support massive lending, resulting in an inflation and credit boom. Heath refused to raise interest rates to counter this, and by the end of his government, the rate of inflation was rising remorselessly. It would increase from 10.2% in 1973 to 24.6% in the year of 1975. Despite being the root cause of the problem, the banks and the financial sector demanded more freedom to lend and speculate, and resisted any attempt to reimpose the regulatory rules that had ensured stability since the war. Instead, they and their media allies blamed inflation on the union's annual wage claims, which were constructed merely to keep pace with the rise in the cost of living. So the next myth is trade unions behaved irresponsibly and held the country to ransom. Most of the union's industrial actions of the period were reactive, either seeking to resist wage or job cuts, or political attacks such as the 1972 Industrial Relations Act. In industry private and nationalised, most British companies, instead of prioritising research, reinvestment and restructuring, preferred to simply lay off workers, prompting industrial militancy in response. After Labour was elected in 1974, the unions showed great patience and abiding by the social contract with Labour, reining in pay demands in return for an increase in the social wage. As a result, inflation began to come down. But although the unions had contributed to containing inflation, the banks continued to send money abroad, causing a balance of payment crisis and threatening a further rise in inflation. While phases 1 and 2 of wage restraint were broadly accepted by the trade unions, phases 3 and 4 were not. Phase 3 allowed a maximum wage increase of 10%, although inflation was higher. By 1978, inflation had fallen to 10%, but the government unwisely chose to go to Phase 4, which limited pay increases to 5%. This set off the strikes of the Winter of Discontent, which were in response to pay increases lower than the rise in the cost of living and large cuts in public services demanded by the International Monetary Fund in return for its loans in 1976. The media greatly exaggerated the size and impact of the strikes to discredit Labour and assist Thatcher. In reality, the strikes inconvenienced relatively few, and compared to genuine catastrophes like the collapse of the UK manufacturing in the 1980s or the banking crisis of 2008, had no permanent economic impact. Despite this, the legend of the Winter of Discontent is now set in stone. Impervious even to the admission of Derek Jameson, editor of the Daily Express in 1979, that, in quotes, "we pulled every dirty trick in the book. We made it look like it was general, universal, and eternal, whereas it was in reality scattered here and there, and no great problem." End quote. So the next one. Myth: the dead remained unburied because of strikes. In early 1979, as part of industrial action across public services, gravediggers at 2 cemeteries, one in Liverpool and one in London, took unofficial strike action. These actions lasted for a few weeks, during which bodies that would have been buried in those cemeteries were kept on ice. In all other cemeteries across the UK, the dead were buried as usual. Myth: Margaret Thatcher saved the country from the decline of the 1970s. By 1979, inflation was going down and North Sea oil was coming on stream. The 1974 to 79 Labour government was unlucky in that its time in office coincided with the capital investment phase of the North Sea oil exploration, rather than the results of that investment. Its tourist successor reaped the benefits and then squandered them, using North Sea oil revenues to fund tax cuts for the middle class and pay benefits to the more than 3 million it allowed to become unemployed, instead of using it as the basis for national economic recovery. Thatcher applied an extreme economic dogma that had an immediate effect of plunging the country into the deepest recession since the war, which it did not begin to emerge from until 1988. For most of the 1980s, UK growth was the same as the 1970s, and on a par with average growth rates in the Western European countries of the time. Inflation was higher when Thatcher left office than when she entered it, and the effect of mass unemployment on British society was devastating. The focus of the British economy shifted from manufacturing industry, which sustained vibrant communities and ensured decent living standards, to a deregulated finance sector based in London, supported by a de-unionised service economy of long working hours and minimal employment protections. So there's quite a lot to go into, but we'll just have a little check back with Stav to see how he's getting on. How are we doing, Stav? Any joy?
Well, I seem to have lost that link on that page. Must have been on another page, and I got rid of it. So basically, I just brought something up, which is, well, yeah, I don't know if you wanted me to comment about the Thatcher era and pre-Thatcher era, the winter of discontent, grave diggers. All of those things happened down here where I was. They may have been put in under false pretenses, but they were seen here. Yeah, Joe Public would have, seen a very deep recession at that time, and it was. As for inflation, well, if somebody looked at a mortgage now, and if they're paying 2 or 3%, try 16%. Try 16%. That's what some people are paying anyway. Things didn't get emptied.
Rats on streets.
Yeah. In some areas, it was the case. In some areas, that actually happened. Now, whether that was done, as an example for the rest of the country and the propaganda got all it. I mean, I didn't know what it was like up north. One was to presume that it was the same, Yeah, you were led to believe it was the same nationally for everybody. So, they've done a great job in what they've done for themselves. But I lived through that era as a teenager, working teenager, and then through my prime years, so to speak. Nothing's really changed much today, other than the people, I would say, really. But that's another conversation we can have on that, PJ. But
so just to round this one article off, to answer John Medhurst's question, was it really so bad? What would you say, Andy?
For some people, it was.
Yeah.
For some people, it was. You've got to remember, this is 1970s. You're talking nearly 4 decades ago. It's a long time ago. I'm an old geezer, as you know, but it was for some people. Although I must admit, the unemployment figures of that time, there always seemed to be a job if you really want, not if you really wanted it, that's the wrong word. You could always find work in factory. What was left in a manufacturing side. The difference today is, the factories that I worked in the 70s, they're all gone now. All of them are gone. So if you'd have taken all the factories away, then yeah, you'd have been looking at a very similar sort of thing that you're looking at today. and it was the manufacturing and that sort of thing that just pretty much gave people jobs. Now that's all gone. That's all gone. So when people say, "Oh, you know, you got to get with it," the new age, China make everything, this, that, and the other, whatever, this, that, and the other. I think farmers used to produce food in fields in those days, but where they don't produce pretty much anything in the way of food today. So you know, there was a labour market for the manufacturing industry and agriculture and that sort of thing, whereas today, well, there isn't any, is there?
No.
So that's the difference, I think. Well, that's one of the main differences. One could argue about, I guess, other things. You could probably argue about, you know. But anyway, do you want me to, this little graph I was going to bring up? I've brought out.
I'll pass you back on to you now if you're ready for that.
Yeah, just to tie into that.
All yours.
Okay. Oh no, that's not the one. Trust me. No, that's not it either. Oh,
You're all up place tonight with your articles.
No, it's not a good night. It's not a good night.
Well, at least you're getting them out. Last week I had an horrendous time.
I might as well scrap the first thing I brought up, really, because I couldn't go into depth with the figures, and we've gone past that.
Well, let's just round it basically off to what.
Okay.
You were showing me, Andy, some charts, which allegedly speaks about how much an individual would have to spend on consuming in order to get us out of this big mess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do believe in my area, did you say it was something like 20-something thousand? What were it? I can't remember quite.
46,000.
That was for you, weren't it, in your area?
No, that was the national.
Oh, that was the national?
Yeah. That's taken as a national average of everybody, you know,
per year?
Yeah, GDP per person, per capita.
Yeah. And we were discussing with that. There's no way I've ever seen that in any job that I've ever done, and I'm pretty sure that you could say the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, these are the figures they hoodwinked Joe Sheeple into thinking that, oh, we're doing all right. You know, we're growing the figures. You know, the economy's growing and all this nonsense. But I was going to go into a lot of spiel about it, but I think that's gone now. But what basically.
Was it £700 a week we got it down to?
Yeah, about that.
So for the people out there, if you are considering to still carry on with this system, I'm not going to describe what system it is, but just be aware that if you can't find a job, each and every one of you that brings in at least £700 that you've got to instantly spend by the time that week's finished, then, you know, let's start thinking of alternative solutions, yeah?
Yep. Well,
anyway, and carry on.
Yeah, well, this little chart here, I gather you can see it, yeah?
Yeah, I've got that.
Yeah. Well, this is April 1992. Right, this gives you just a very quick breakdown of, you know, where the money was generated in the economy. Right, you've got construction was 7%. Okay, you've got other, which is 4%. Construction 7%. Manufacturing in 1992 is 21%. Oh, that's a nice little slice. Reasonable. This here is the service sector was 68%. Okay. So if we jump forward to 2011, I haven't got the chart I wanted, so that it was this as close in the time to get. But if even in 2011, all of a sudden you've got 3% other, 7% construction, 10% manufacturing, 10%, and all this is service sector. All this is. Oh, they're shrinking the public service, you know, they're getting rid of the civil servants and cutting back on that. But this is what, you know, this services sector is what it relies on. You know, that's what the country apparently relies on. So it's all service sector. I haven't got family members that don't work in the service sector. Every single one of my nephews and nieces and brothers and sisters that are still working age, they all work in the service sector. None of them work on a building site. None of them work on a farm. None of them work in a factory making things. None of them, not one of them. They're all in service sector jobs. From you know, the one or two was in the civil service, banking system, and that stuff. So that's what you're looking at. So if I move on from there with the next article, yeah. Which is basically, where does all this money come from? Because I mean, really, years ago, you know, the value of the country was what it exported, and the whole idea was to have a cheap exporting, you know, basically. So you know, like Germany was, and it's not actually, it's starting to falter. That it was you could export it cheaply, so you'd be quids in it. It would work. So basically, it was world trade, and whatever you could give to the world, whatever you could make for the world, you would become a prosperous country. But nowadays, it doesn't seem to be that. It seems to be consumerism and service sector. So where is this money coming from? That's what you've got to work out. I've kind of dashed forward a bit quickly than I wanted to explain, so I sort of condensed it a bit there. So where does it come from? Well, basically, it comes from the so-called banking fraternity, but most of it today is what they call quantitative easing. Now, this article is based on the American system and the American Central Bank, which is the privately owned Federal Reserve. In our country, it's supposedly the Bank of England. So the central bank, and the central bank for America is the Federal Reserve, if you didn't know that. But anyway, I'll just quickly look at this, read you this. We might skim over a bit, but see how we go. A peakprosperity.com reader recently lamented, I've been trying to get my head around the mechanisms of QE, which is quantitative easing. Not being an economist or experienced investor, I don't really understand a lot of the jargon. The usual simple definition of QE as thin air money printing does not satisfy my need for understanding either. Having hunted for a description of QE for dummies, that leaves me feeling like I get it, but with no luck. My difficulty is understanding how thin air money gets into circulation. This is printing money out of thin air. You know, you've heard the saying, I should think. Most people have anyway. So I'm going to do my best to answer this plea in as an intuitive and straightforward as manner as I can. I too share the need to understand the mechanism of process in order to feel like I have a great grasp of it. I think it's critically important to understand QE, also known by its full name, quantitative easing, and what it really represents, because it is without doubt one of the largest market-shaping forces of our times. Further, it represents extraordinary risks and may well turn out to be a decisive shaping process for the future as well, and not in a good way. Despite its sophisticated sounding name, QE is nothing more complicated than the Fed buying assets from commercial banks and other private financial institutions. I put assets in quotes because the Fed does not buy things like land, Stradivari, violins, diamonds, gold or silver from these institutions, but rather various forms of debt. That's the quote, debt. The main forms of debt purchased are treasury bills, notes, bonds, and mortgage-backed securities, MBS, paper. There could well be other forms too, but we currently have no visibility into the composition of the sizable portion of the Fed's balance sheet that comprises the other assets line. I'll get into that in more detail in a minute. So basically, then the question comes in. Quantitative easing, QE, is an unconventional monetary policy used by central banks to stimulate the national economy when conventional monetary policy has become ineffective. You know, like selling things to other countries and, world trade and that sort of thing. Central bank implements quantitative easing by buying financial assets from commercial banks and other private institutions, thus creating money and injecting a predetermined quantity of money into the economy. Quantitative easing increases the excess reserves of the banks and raises the price of the financial assets bought, which lowers their yield. The reason that QE differs from normal monetary policy is that in the normal case, the purchase of various bond types by the Fed does two things. It lowers interest rates and it increases the amount of money in the system. QE, on the other hand, cannot lower interbank interest rates any further than they already are because they are at 0%. So a different name is used for this process in which the only thing being eased is the quantity of money, hence quantitative easing. This is just a fancy way of saying that the central bank, via prior errors and miscalculation, has found itself stuck in a trap where it has lost one of its most potent tools, the price of money, and now it can only fiddle with the quantity of money. Here's a simple picture that I drew to illustrate just how simple, fancy sounding process really is. Assets, dollars, assets, dollars, assets, dollars. Right, where the thing is, they might send promises or what they call financial assets, bonds, whatever, right, etc., financial institutes, and they send off them. Where does this come from? Where the hell does this come from? Well, when the Fed performs this trick, what happens is the assets end up on the banks on its balance sheet as well. Assets, of course. Luckily, the Fed provides reasonable clarity in a timely manner on the expansion of its balance sheet, so we can see pretty well what's going on here as it happens. In graph form, we can see that the Fed's asset balance had been holding steady at 2.7 trillion for a bit over a year, but then the latest round of QE4 began, which has swelled the Fed balance sheet above that $3 trillion and its way to at least $4 trillion by the end of the year. This is 2013. This is a bit of an old article, but there you go. You can see it's just going up and up and up. Central banks perform QE by first crediting its own account with money it has created ex nihilo, out of nothing, in brackets. It then purchases financial assets, including government bonds and corporate bonds from banks and other financial institutes, in a process referred to as open market operations. The purchases by way of account deposits give banks the excess reserves required for them to create new money by the process of deposit multiplication from increased lending in the fractional reserve banking system. For every £1,000 somebody borrows, it creates another 9,000 or 10,000, I think it's 10% or 10 times. So they create even more money from nothing out of nothing. It's ridiculous. The increase in the money supply thus stimulates the economy. Risks include the policy being more effective than intended, spurring hyperinflation, or the risk of not being effective enough. If banks opt simply to pocket the additional cash in order to increase their capital reserves and fund of increasing defaults in their present money portfolio. So, right, basically, this just goes on to say, what's the price of the thin money up in here? At this point, you might be thinking, where did the Fed get the money to buy these assets? The answer to that is simple. It's just created out of thin air, or ex nihilo. If you want to use the Latin to make it sound more official, I can't pronounce it, but in these modern times, no actual paper money was created in exchange. Of course, just a few clicks on a computer keyboard, and voila, billions and billions of dollars are created. There are several critical risks to flooding the world with invented money. Once we understand them, it becomes clearer how the Fed's decision to pursue QE has put it in a box where its available options are becoming fewer and fewer, and it explains why the Fed is continuing and will continue until it simply can't, with its aggressive money printing. In part 2, why you really need to care about the implications. We lay out these risks and identify the markers you can follow to track them. We in detail how the QE process dissolves, blah, blah, blah. To make our situation clear, we are living through the largest and most outlandish monetary experiment ever conducted by humans upon themselves. These are extraordinary times, and no matter how many times the mainstream press tries to convince you that a rising stock market or a rebounding housing market implies that we are returning to healthy economic balance. Don't fall for it. The Fed is in uncharted territory, having created a monster it can no longer control. In the process, it is blowing new asset bubbles that are benefiting those with first access to the newly printing money. We know that is banks and corporations at the expense of savers, pensioners, and anyone exercising fiscal prudence. This, of course, is creating a vast and growing inequality between the top 1% and everyone else. When this misadventure in monetary policy ends, as both math and history says it must, it will be messy, uncontrolled, and very painful for holders of just about every sort of financial instrument out there: stocks, bonds, derivatives, etc. That's why understanding the root cause and risks of QE is so important in order to identify the best shelters for protecting the purchasing power of your wealth, and blah, blah, blah. So basically, that pretty much explains it if you kind of follow where I like to go down here, and you get these comments sometimes, like this guy says here, an excellent and clear description of what QE is, but I'm afraid I have to add to the bad news on this. The Fed is now committed to QE, not to rescue the economy, but to finance the government and keep the banks afloat. Ironically, the last thing the Fed needs now is sustained economic recovery. For the reason Chris implies, there is no way QE can be unwound. In other words, it's gone too far. You ain't going to be able to pay this crap off. It's not going to happen. It doesn't matter if you had 100% growth in a year. It still will not be paid off. It's an illusion that all governments operate under at the moment. It says here, rising interest will break the banks, the government, and undermine the dollar. Here in the UK, we have the same problem, and both Japan and Eurozone have different versions of the same problem. It cannot be paid off. It's mathematically impossible. It cannot be paid off, right? That's what people are not getting into their heads. Well, are they getting into their heads? Do they have a choice? Do they still carry on going and getting more debt or whatever?
I can present a short 1 minute audio, maybe 1.5 minutes, yeah?
Go on then, yeah.
Just to add on to what you've just presented, yeah?
Yeah.
So here we go.
Debate on money creation and society, and I invite the honourable gentleman member for Wickham to move the motion. Mr. Steve Baker.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this House has considered the subject of money creation and society. The methods of money production in society today are profoundly corrupting in ways which would matter to everyone if they were clearly understood. The essence of this debate is who should be allowed to create money, how, and at whose risk. It's no wonder that it has attracted support from across the political spectrum, although I think looking around the chamber, the Rochester and Stroud by-election has perhaps taken its toll. But I'm grateful to honourable and right honourable friends from all political parties, including the honourable gentleman for Clacton, the honourable lady for Brighton Pavilion, the honourable gentleman for Oldham, West and Royton, for their support in securing this debate. One of the most memorable quotes about money and banking is usually attributed to Henry Ford. He said, "It's well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." Well, let's hope we don't have a revolution, Mr. Speaker, because I feel sure we're all conservatives on this side. How's it done? Well, the process is so simple, the mind is repelled. Whenever a bank makes a loan, it simultaneously creates a matching deposit in the borrower's bank account, thereby creating new money. Many times I've been told that this is ridiculous, even by one employee who'd previously worked for the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation of the United States. The explanation is actually taken from the Bank of England article, Money Creation in the Modern Economy. It seems to me rather hard to dismiss.
Well, there you go, Andy. Put yourself on mute.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, money creation in society. Well, do you see, the thing is, I actually think it's worse than that. This is what people are being sold, right? Well, the banks don't actually make jack shit. They don't even make money out of thin air, as far as I'm concerned. Because every time you go to take a loan out, like the guy said in the House of Commons there, right, you put up a certificate, you put up a check, actually, a promissory note, right?
Yeah.
You go to the table with your sweat equity, saying that I want a mortgage, say, is the loan on a mortgage, say it's 35 years or 30 years, right? You're taking your life sweat equity to the table for 30 years, okay? And what all they do is the private bank just deposits the money out of nowhere into an account for you, basically. He then turns round and lends you your money that you've created, because if you hadn't have gone to the bank with your promise check, your promise to pay, it wouldn't exist. So they steal your sweat equity and they sell it back to you, and then they have the cheek to put interest on top of it as well. So I don't actually...
But it goes further than that, Andy, because once you've worked all that out, then you start to understand that it was never money in the first place. It was nothing more than just numbers.
It's numbers for your sweat equity. But what you're saying, they bring nothing to the table. There is no binding contract. There isn't even a contract there. So people take out a mortgage. Hey, why the hell are you paying it? There is no actual lawful contract there. They have to be a binding lawful contract, right? They have to, there's got to be a full exposure of where the money came from. They've got to tell you where that money is, right? That they've borrowed, that they've lent to you, right? That they're lending to you at interest, what they want paying for lending, borrowing this money. There is none. So therefore, there is no lawful contract. So why people pay mortgages, I don't know, because, at the end of the day, it's not a lawfully binding contract because they haven't given you full disclosure. And that is what people are at. And you know what? It's you created the damn stuff, because if you hadn't gone to the bank and signed up 30 years of your life of working day in, day out, right? In actual fact, the mortgage is paid off from day one. You don't owe them a goddamn thing. But, you try and tell people, they say, you're off the rocker, mate, or, you're making this up, or whatever. Well, you think about it, what the guy just said in the House of Commons, in a debate in the House of Commons. And, go and do your own research. So again, I always say that, do your own research. If I'm missing something here, okay, they make you an offer you can't resist. But you pay me otherwise, and that is it. So do we have a democracy? Do we have a government of, public servants? Do we have? So anyway, I'll just basically finish. Can I finish off with this little quick article?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you if you'd got anything else. Yeah, finish off, Andy.
Okay, well, I've got a couple. We've got on the economy, that is. I think it's, yeah, I think it's. Oh, here it is. This is basically from the Daily Mash. Yeah, Britain's economy realises it's just a load of bullshit. Right, that sums it up. It says Britain's economy has slowed after it realised it was living in a fantasy world. The latest GDP figures showed the economy is now coming to terms with the fact that its apparent health was based on the usual bullshit concoction of houses and unsustainable retail therapy. Britain's economy said, I am just so full of crap. I wanted everyone to believe that I was so strong, like an oak, but I'm actually just a cardboard cutout of an oak. I'm spending money I don't have on things that will make me feel better about how poor I am. That's not an economy. That's tawdry self-delusion, and I will have nothing more to do with it. But Chancellor George Osborne said the British economy is absolutely fine. This is blatant attention seeking by an ungrateful bastard designed to fuck me up the arse just when I had the world in my grasp. Repeat after me. Houses, cars, and lovely things. Houses, cars, and lovely things. So there we go. An X-rated bit there. I should have warned, shouldn't I? Oh, it's after the watershed.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've got just that one. Do you have any remedies for all this rubbish, PJ?
Yeah, I can continue with a few things I've got.
Okay, well, I'll come back.
You finished on yours for now then, yeah?
I've just got that one article to come, but we'll...
All right, let me know if you can see mine okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go into a few solutions and alternatives. This is an article from Guardian. The date is today, 8th of November. We can't afford to squander the talents of half the UK. We need equal pay now. How many more days of action will there have to be before balance is achieved? Tonight's episode's pretty much going into where I missed out last week when we covered equality, so it does have a little bit of that, which is sort of good for me because I can kind of make up for letting you guys down last week. But I'll read this one. More than 4 decades have passed since strikers at Ford's Dagenham plant helped usher in the Equal Pay Act. Yet tomorrow, with 8 weeks still to go until the end of the year, women in effect stop earning relative to their male counterparts. The point in the year campaigners have dubbed Equal Pay Day is based on the 14.2% gap in average hourly pay between men and women working full-time. That gap is part of a much wider inequality problem in Britain's workplaces. Not only are women likely to earn tens of thousands of pounds less than male colleagues over a career, they will also face a tougher battle getting to the top. They are far more likely than men to work in low-paid part-time jobs, and when caring needs hit a family, be it for small children or aging parents, women are still more likely than their male partners to cut their hours or give up work altogether to shoulder the load. Good news, then, that David Cameron has vowed to end the gender pay gap in a generation. Shortly after re-election, he announced new rules forcing every company with more than 250 employees to start charging 5p for carrier bags. Oh, no, that's not it. To publish the difference between the average pay of its male and female employees. There were also encouraging noises in 2 government-backed reports published over the last fortnight. The most recent looked at the UK's financial sector, where fewer women progress to senior levels than in any other industry. Leading the government-backed review, Jane Ann Gadier, the chief executive of Virgin Money, recommended the bonuses of city executives be linked to hitting targets for the number of senior women appointed at a firm. That followed a report from Lord Mervyn Davies that showed FTSE 100 companies had exceeded the targets of having 25% women on their boards, more than doubling their numbers from 2011 when the goal was set. Davies has now raised the bar, urging Britain's biggest companies to ensure that at least a third of board positions are held by women by the end of a decade. So he should. The rise in numbers of women on boards is welcome, but started from a low base. Research by The Guardian this year showed there were more men called John running FTSE 100 companies than all the female bosses combined. There are plenty of other reasons campaigners will be pushing Cameron and colleagues to keep their word on equality. When and if women do make it to the top against the odds, they tend to be paid far less than their male peers. New analysis being published by the TUC tomorrow will show that as people move up this pay scale, the gap between men and women widens. There is still widespread evidence too of pregnant women and new mothers being discriminated against by their employers. Employers are by no means alone in carrying the blame of entrenched stereotypes around the role of mothers. Parents themselves are guilty of outmoded thinking when it comes to deciding who cuts their work commitments to care for the children. In theory, shared parental leave, which came into force this year, should challenge the stereotype of the mother as the main carer. But in reality, for most families, it would not make financial sense to take advantage of the new rules. It's baby steps rather than social revolution, so will a generation be long enough? For the economy, it simply has to be. More than half of our graduates are women, and a country with such woeful productivity levels cannot afford to squander so much talent, training, and education. But it will require more than reports and recommendations. Investors must lobby for more equality in companies. Businesses themselves can fight discrimination, offer more flexibility, and be transparent about pay. The government, meanwhile, must do more on childcare and to help fathers take parental leave. Only if action is taken on all fronts can we expect to stop mocking equal pay day. So goes into some other one here with VW. Insular VW badly needs some independence. The news last week that Volkswagen may have rigged carbon dioxide tests as well as those for diesel emissions is a disaster for the German company. For two reasons. First, rigging CO2 tests resonates more with governments and motorists than the diesel scandal. CO2 affects the tax band that a vehicle sits in and its fuel consumption, so governments will be able to force the company to repay tax credits, and customers will ask for compensation for their fuel costs. Second, the discovery of another front in the scandal erodes the credibility of VW's investigation, its management, and the company's corporate governance. Matthias Müller, the new chief executive, was already stretching his credibility when he claimed that a handful of rogue engineers were behind the installation of defeat device software into 11 million diesel cars. Now that we know VW may also have cheated other tests, this statement becomes even more unacceptable. Even if it was 10 to 20 rogue engineers who created the scandal, there is something deeply wrong in a company where this level of deception is allowed to foster or is not spotted. VW's statement revealing its concerns about the CO2 levels admitted by 800,000 cars was laughable. It had no detail about the models involved or how the irregularities occurred. It provided more questions than answers. The German car maker sorely needs an independent and experienced voice at the top to help it through the crisis. The bosses of Britain's leading companies are criticised when they go awry, and rightly so, but the standards that FTSE 100 companies are held to should be applauded. The need for an independent chairman, a senior independent director, and the regular refreshing of boards means management is held to account and is connected with the outside world. VW gives the impression that it is insular. Its board is full of local government ministers and members of the, whatever that says, Peach, I'm not very good at these words, and Porsche family. The Works Council is represented while the chairman is the former finance director. The company should take a leaf out of Britain's book and bring some outsiders on it to its board. So finally in this article, cyber attack puts Tuk-Tuk's target out of reach. Is embattled Tuk-Tuk chief executive Dido Harding about to set a record for the fastest abandonment of a core financial target? It was only in May that she upgraded the firm's revenue targets. The last quarter had seen record growth and she thought Tuk-Tuk could run at 5% every year to 2017 and beyond. After the cyber attack suffered by the company a fortnight ago, few in the city think it can be done. On Friday, the group said the impact was less than feared, but the damage to the brand will be hard to shake off. Indeed, think of Harding's reign as a 5-year attempted to shed Tuk-Tuk's reputation for poor customer service. Until the hack, she seemed to be winning. Hard to say so now. Chairman and founder Sir Charles Dunstone's thoughts would be good to know. Since the optimism in May, the value of his 30% stake has fallen by 450 million. Any comments before I move on?
You pretty much said it all about the inequality with between the women and men even today. It's even, I don't think it's actually gone any further forward than when I was a teenager, to be perfectly honest. As far as the talk are, well, their service is shit, you know. Their quality, their brand is crap, and basically you get hacked. And yeah, upset on that, isn't it? Really, but yeah, you want to carry on then, PJ, and I'll bring mine up when you're done. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to share this article because it was relevant. It's recent today. It mixed in a bit of what I missed out last week, and it didn't, steer it too far away from economy topic of tonight. So if you can put yourself on mute while I move on. Austerity and the rise of poverty in Britain. Austerity is a political choice, not an economic necessity, and it is having devastating consequences. Poverty and social hardship in the UK, with gross domestic product (GDP) at US $2.94 trillion in 2014. The UK has the fifth largest economy in the world after Germany and Japan. It also suffers from acute income and wealth inequality, and according to Oxfam, 1 in 5, or 20%, of the population live below our official poverty line, meaning that they experience life as a daily struggle. The Conservative government repeatedly proclaims that the bitter medicine of economic austerity, so badly needed to balance the nation's wobbly books, is the right thing to do. Yes, it's painful, but we're all in this together, and our economic plan is working. Unemployment and inflation are low, and the economy is growing faster, in fact, than any other industrialized nation. At this point, I'd normally play that video with David Cameron's speech talking about all this stuff, but where he actually says, when we say we're all in this together, we mean it. And everybody else goes, here, here. There you go. I'm not going to play the video, but I guess you guys have already seen it a dozen times already. So the poor get poorer. Given all this good news, if any, one would expect the people of Britain to be doing rather well. However, this is far from the case. After extensive investigation, the independent research project Poverty and Social Exclusion in the United Kingdom concluded that poverty in Britain is worse now than it has ever been for the past 30 years. Indeed, the number of people living in poverty has doubled since 1983. The findings of PSE contradict the upbeat rhetoric of Prime Minister Cameron and co, but echo those of leading charities, including Oxfam and Barnardo's, who state that there are actually 3.7 million children living in poverty in the UK. That's over a quarter of all children. Poverty is a slippery term to define, and severe poverty even more so. Governments around the world use various criteria to determine whether someone is poor or not. Criteria which more often than not are shaped to serve the interests of the ruling party. The UK government employs a simplistic, rather crude method. If a family is earning less than 60% of median income, currently around $26,000 or $40,000 in US, then they are in poverty. This unimaginative, narrow approach, PSE explains, is an arbitrary, I can't really say that word tonight, definition and has been much criticised. PSE defines poverty more badly, based on the consensual method. This includes multiple deprivation and income, minimum acceptable living standards, as well as social exclusion, and is to the objective observer a far more intelligent and just system. The detailed PSE report is full of depressing details. Chief amongst the headline statistics are the findings that a third of people in the UK suffer significant difficulties and about a quarter have an unacceptably low standard of living. 4 million children and adults are not properly fed by today's standards. Around 1.5 million children live in households that cannot afford to heat their homes, and end up to 2.5 million children live in homes that are damp. The impact of poverty on children is acute and long-lasting, perpetuating social injustice and inequality, a major problem in the UK. The children's charity, Barnardo's, studied the educational and health effects of child poverty. They found that poor children do worse at school. A mere 5% of the poorest achieve a good level of development at the end of their reception year, aged 5 to 6, compared to almost 70% of other pupils. The poorest teenagers pass less exams, if any, and consequently cannot go to university, making it harder for them to get a good, fulfilling and well-paid job, one that allows them to move out of the prison of poverty. Health-wise, it's an even bleaker picture. Infant mortality is 10% higher for children in the lowest social groups than the average, and 3-year-olds living in households with incomes below about £10,000 are 2.5 times more likely to suffer chronic illness than children from financially better off families. These shocking facts reveal some of the consequences of the government's ideological economic approach. It is a neoliberal strategy, set firmly in motion in the 1980s under Margaret Thatcher. It was characterized, Oxfam explains, by financial liberalisation, the erosion of social security and deregulation of the labour market. By 2008, this approach, continued with New Labour under Blair, had led to a dramatic increase in the number of people living in poverty, which almost doubled from 7.3 million people in 1979 to 13.5 million in 2008, and has fueled the highest levels of income and wealth inequality of any industrialized country except the USA. It is estimated that The Guardian reports that the richest 1% in the country have accumulated as much wealth as the poorest 55% of the population put together, and under the government's economic plan, such divisions will only increase. Inequality is the inevitable consequence of the injustices inherent in the neoliberalism. The stronger an economy is wedded to neoliberal principles, the greater the inequality. The idea of trickle-down is a failed fantasy promulgated by the rich to keep the poor impoverished. Wealth, opportunity, and influence flow in one direction only, which is up. As Arundhati Roy puts it, trickle-down hasn't worked, but gush up has. Inequality fuels all manners of social ills, from teenage pregnancies to homicide, depression and distrust, drug and alcohol dependency, obesity and illiteracy, with CEOs of major corporations earning up to 100 times the average UK wage of £12 or $18 an hour. It is a miracle that there aren't violent mass protests taking place all the time. But then people are far too exhausted from excessive working hours and the stress of economic hardship to have the strength for righteous rebellion. And of course, TV, poor diet, alcohol, and associated distractions ensure that social conformity, material discontent, and emotional passivity are pretty much maintained. Suffering by ideological design. After the financial calamity of 2008-2009, a number of countries across Europe, Spain, Portugal, and Greece as an example, all now in recession, introduced austerity policies, and since 2010, austerity has been the UK's government strategy for tackling the impact of the economic crash. The stated aim of the Conservatives' programme is to reduce the deficit, give confidence to the markets, and therefore deliver growth to the economy. Their one-sided methodology involves extreme public sector cutbacks, including scrapping over 1 million jobs by 2018 and freezing wages. making severe reductions in welfare, as well as introducing nominal tax increases. For every £100 of deficit reduction, £85 comes through spending cuts, while £15 is achieved through increased taxes. As administered by the Conservatives, austerity amounts to war on the poor, and is the principal cause of the dramatic increase in poverty, including child poverty and homelessness. The government proposes to cut £12 billion by 2017 to 18 from welfare spending, and have already made a devastating start. Tax credits have been slashed, all benefits will be frozen for 4 years, despite inflation, and the total amount of welfare someone can claim has been reduced. The most vulnerable members of society are taking the full hit from their aggressive, regressive policies, with women and children being affected most acutely, directly and indirectly. Despite having a statutory duty to end child poverty by 2020, according to Oxfam, an additional 1 million children will be pushed into poverty as a result of their socially divisive, unjust policies, and an extra 1.5 million working-age adults are expected to fall into poverty. We are constantly told that austerity is the uncomfortable route to sustained economic growth and the promised land of zero deficit, an ideological paradise, which the Conservatives claim will more than make up for the hardships, destruction of public services, personal pain caused along the way. In fact, the UK budget deficit, what the government borrows each year, is estimated to be 4.9% of GDP, or £88 billion, this year, an all-time high, and government debt at around £1.5 trillion is almost double than what it was in 2010, when the Conservative-led coalition came into power. Austerity, according to Nobel Prize winner Joseph Stiglitz, has failed and is contributing to equality that will make economic weakness longer-lived, and needlessly contributes to the suffering of the jobless and the poor for many years. He goes on to say that there is no instance of a large economy getting to grow through austerity. If policies based on the austerity are allowed to continue in Britain and elsewhere across Europe, Oxfam warns inequality will rise, the continent's hard-fought social gains will be undermined, and a generation will be consigned to a life of hopeless poverty. The need for real alternatives. Okay, this is when it gets interesting. To finalise Flux News. The devotees of neoliberalism are often heard chanting that there is no alternative to their peculiar economic belief system. It is a model that has served them well, and to which, perhaps understandably, they are deeply attached. Austerity, it appears, is being used to further disempower the majority. A well-rehearsed party rhetoric is constantly churned out. It's either increased debt or austerity, they sing, and we must live with our means. Easy when your means run into the millions. Difficult when your benefit is cut and you can't afford to buy any food or heat your home, if you've even got an home. If we are to create a just society throughout the world, we need a totally new approach to the way the economy is managed, a radical vision of society, an approach that transcends ideologies and places the principle of sharing at its heart, an approach which meets the needs and rights of the many, not just the basic needs of food and shelter, but the right to grow as a human being. As Oxfam states, the economic, ethical and financial argument for change could not be stronger. Next article. Can a complex global economy exist without money? This might sound like a ridiculous question, but what I want to know is it possible to create a non-money based economy, not communism or socialism, but a real working functioning economy? If not, then why is our economy based on a currency that has no real value, no longer backed by gold, the US dollar is backed by bonds from the Federal Reserve, or future potential profits. So let's just take you into a few of these comments, what people are putting here, yeah? Just to give you an idea of what some people are thinking. Yes, it can get rid of money for a gated type economy based on self-sufficiency, where now we can have smart card tracking our labour, not money. Money is the worst thing. Greedy people like the word borrow. Also called economy experts also called economy experts to me are jokes. I believe that's supposed to say. I have real ideas that can run a country without ghettos. It will take small steps to undo the crap that the current global catastrophe that the world has created for itself. How about having it all computerized with computers calculate value? I've thought about this a lot. I wonder if we could have energy units. The value of a product would be calculated, thus energy to make it and resource, total global availability, quality value and environmental impact. Labour would be valued. Physical, mental, labour and educational skills and actual societal need. Taking in the current selfishness of the human race, I do not think that such an economy would be possible in countries such as England and America. However, it might be possible in societies such as India, because people are a lot more trusting there, and in fact, economies such as this still exist in some places. Contains films which highlight the built-in failures of the monetary system enforced in the world today, which is the Zeitgeist movement. For example, word poverty. People campaign to make a difference without realizing that it is world poverty that allows them to experience prosperity to such a level they can afford to donate the excess money. This division of wealth will only keep increasing until the system goes bust. Yes, the system will go bust. There may be. Next one. Trading with others would need a form of exchange. Paper money has become that. However, just like in a family, we can make a country to work like one. Everyone works and everyone gets. The most valued work gets the most. We do things because it is needed. We don't make AC units that are energy inefficient because it makes money. We make only energy efficient units because our family country needs to become less reliant on foreign energy. We use Americans to manufacture because we are all working for the common cause. No need to let people die without food, or house, or medical. Last one I'll read, 5 years ago. Funny that someone openly asked question. I've asked many people this question and they seem to think that I'm crazy. Some time ago I started saving the web searching for some answers on this topic, and I came across a movement that actually explains how this can be possible. It is called the Venus Project, founded by blah, blah, blah. This movement explains how people can actually live in a society in harmony, utilizing our technology and eliminating the use of money. I encourage everyone to visit the link, venusproject.com, and maybe get answers just as I did. We did cover the Venus Project on a Flux News earlier on in the year. So now we've got a few ideas of what people are thinking and saying. Move on to my next article. Living without money, you've got the power. This is contributionism, started off by Michael Tellinger. One of his quotes here says, "Let each citizen contribute their natural talents or acquired skills to the greater benefit of all in the community." Contributionism is a resource-based economic system that says money is not only unnecessary, but counter to abundance. While a money economy is debt-based and designed to keep us chasing money, contributionism is creations asset-based and designed to utilize each person's unique abilities and skills. The moneyless Ubuntu contribution system is an adaptation of ancient tribal customs and is not based on barter or trade, since barter and trading is just another form of money. Everything needed is available to everyone at all times. Hoarding or accumulating stuff and planning for old age is simply unnecessary. Contributionists believe ownership of land as unnecessary. and to be frank, impossible. We are custodians of the land, and each custodian is responsible for her care. When we act in harmony with nature, she yields abundance for all. In the words of Chief Seattle in 1854, how can you buy or sell the sky? We do not own the freshness of the air or the sparkle on the water. How then can you buy them from us? Every part of the earth is sacred to my people, holy in their memory and experience. We know the white man does not understand our ways. He is a stranger who's come in the night and takes from the land whatever he needs. The earth is not his friend, but his enemy. And when he's conquered it, he moves on. He kidnaps the earth from his children, for whatever befalls the earth befalls the children of the earth. Interesting character, Michael Tellinger. Lovely little quote. Some fascinating information. Sure you'll agree.
Yeah, Ubuntu movement.
Ubuntu, yes.
Contributionism. That's it. Why does people want to own anything? Where does owning come from? It comes from wars, possession, holding, hoarding. I mean, why would you want to own anything when you can share everything? If everybody shared everything, there'd be no point in owning anything. And why would you?
Because as soon as you start mentioning sharing it, people bring it back to communism.
Well, that's just a load of old crap. That's a political movement that was put together by some guy who's buried in London and other Masonic people and God knows what, you know. That was just put out there as a vehicle to say, well, look, you know, this sharing business, you know, the companies, you know, they're corrupt. It's a load of old this and that, whatever. It's just put out there to con people into thinking that it doesn't work or whatever. I just think contributionism is the Ubuntu is very interesting, and there is actually a small Ubuntu community starting up, I believe, in the southwest of the UK. So we'll watch how they get on. And why not? That's the way it should be. You're only here for a short while in the physical realm. Why would you want to own anything? You can't take it with you. An old saying. How can you own it if you can't take it with you? You know. So you really only rent it anyway or share it. So why bother with the financial system? I've got one more article. If you want me to move on, PJ, and finish and wrap this up.
Yeah, I'll just finish this one article and then I'll let you close off with yours, yeah. Okay, so the sharing economy is dead and we killed it. 5 years ago, everybody was excited about the idea of using tech to borrow things like power drills. In practice, though, not so much. How many of you own a power drill? Rachel Botsman, the author of the book The Rise of Collaborative Consumption, asked the audience of TEDx Sydney in 2010. Predictably, nearly everyone raised his or her hand. The power drill will be used around 12 to 15 minutes in its entire lifetime. Botsman continued with mock exasperation. It's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? Because what you need is the hole, not the drill. After pausing for a moment as the audience chuckled, she provided the obvious solution. Why don't you rent the drill? Or rent out your own drill to other people and make some money from it? Back then, this version of what Botsman called collaborative consumption, or what would become better known as the sharing economy, seemed like a warm and fuzzy inevitability. American consumerism had been tamped by one of the worst recessions in history. Concerns about the environment were growing, and the new online networks provided a connective thread that could help us get by on less than by sharing things with our neighbours. We now live in a global village where we can mimic the ties that used to happen face to face. but on a scale and in a way that has never been possible before. Boltzmann explained, and these new systems allowed us to engage in a humanness that got lost along the way. We were now, she said, experiencing a seismic shift from individual getting and spending towards a rediscovery of collective good. Already there were a bevy of startups with dreams of facilitating the community, shared power drill. EcoModo had launched in 2007, Crowd Rent, Share Some Sugar, and Neighbour Goods in 2009, Thingloop, Also We, and Snap Goods in 2010. The media loved the idea. Entrepreneur magazine named Neighbour Goods one of its 100 most brilliant companies of 2011, and it's hard to find a publication that covers technology that did not mention the idea of sharing the power drill. Many of them cited the example directly. The Time magazine explains that renting a power drill via Snap Goods for the 1 day you need it is a lot cheaper than buying it. The Guardian, when introducing Neighbour Goods, said that the idea made sense, with the average power drill used only about 12 minutes per year. The New York Daily News told New Yorkers they could save countless ways by borrowing items like a power drill from neighbours, and Wired asked, if I can avoid buying an electrical drill for that one job, or some temporary dinner party chairs, or a car I will drive maybe a couple of times a month, well, why wouldn't I rent them from you? Even companies that weren't renting power drills proselytized the theory. There are 80 million power drills in America that are used an average of 13 minutes. Airbnb CEO Brian Chesky told the New York Times in 2013 column about the sharing economy, does everybody really need their own drill? There was just one problem. As Adam Burke, the founder of Neighboro, puts it, everything made sense, except that nobody gives a shit. They go buy a drill, or they just bang a screwdriver through the wall. Of the 8 sites listed above, only Neighbour Good is still around. After it ran through its seed funding, it was salvaged by an investor with a personal interest in the idea. About 42,000 people have signed up, though fewer than 10,000 are active. While sites like Airbnb and Ubot became giant companies, the platform of which we would share our power drills within neighbours never took off. Instead of platforms that would inspire human interaction and create less waste, what emerged were companies that awkwardly fit into and, at times, completely twisted this vision of neighbourhood sharing. The sharing economy grew to include an odd menagerie of companies with little in common. Groupon shared the collective acting of tipping a deal. Kickstarter shared a similar funding global among many contributors. Sites like Airbnb shared homes, but charged by the night like a hotel. Gig economy platforms like Uber and Andy shared the labour of independent contractors paid by the hour or mile. And Netflix somehow even managed to fall under the sharing economy umbrella at one point. Though a few pieces of the original sharing economy promise survived, like peer-to-peer car sharing services, relay rides, and get around and bike sharing site Spinlister. Today they are largely divorced from the concept of a global village. Somehow, when a major hotel chain forms a partnership with a $50 billion company, it is able to pass the move off as joining the sharing economy. But the real sharing economy is dead. It was a beautiful idea that struck hard. But when it died, nobody seemed to notice. Nobody seemed to care. As Judge Colin would say, if he was still around, some publications continued to cite Snap Goods. For instance, a year after it shut down, and nobody seemed to ask the question of how an idea that everybody loved so much, an idea that made so much sense on a practical and social level, morphed in the pure capitalism that it is today. So for Gary Siege, who founded a peer-to-peer rental platform called Zillock in 2007. Inspiration struck after he actually did need a power drill on a Sunday in Paris. For Ron J. Williams, the founder of Snapgoods, it was a motorcycle he rented from Craigslist. For Kira Schwartz, the founder of Share Some Sugar, it was a ladder. This story behind neighborhood sharing services, no matter the object, often goes something like this. I didn't know how many times I would need the ladder, so I thought there has to be someone who I can borrow it from. Schwartz says, I rang a couple of neighbours' doorbells and people didn't have long enough ladders. So I went online and I was like, okay, $175 to buy something I'm probably going to just use once. That seems ridiculous, but it was so easy to find something online to buy that I figured, oh gosh, it should be this easy to find something in my neighbourhood. That's kind of when the light bulb went off. The idea of renting to neighbours launched to a flurry of attention and praise. William's mother took articles about Snapgoods to show her neighbours, and for the first time, Williams felt that she really understood what he did. We never paid a dime for PR, he says. We never invested in an aggressive marketing, but we had just an absurd amount of traffic for a pretty green team doing a startup from the ground up. The site drew about 30,000 visitors per month at its peak, and Snapgoods signed up about 100,000 users. After he appeared on Today's Show, for instance, Burke says about 2,000 people signed up for Neighbora in 1 week. But most of these platforms soon discovered a discomforting incongruity between enthusiasm for the concepts and actual use. Everybody loved the idea. It was like, oh, this is great. I would love to use it, says Schwartz. Then I launched the thing and it was super slow adoption. Snapgoods and Neighborgoods had more people who wanted to lend things than wanted to pay to use them. Some Share Some Sugar had the opposite problem. Some sites have pockets of items that worked on Snapgoods. For instance, electronics and photo equipment took off. But it was tough to become the default platform for renting anything. For Neighborgoods founder Mickey Krimmel, it seemed like a matter of execution. A change she made right away was removing the option to rent goods, which ensured the platform would truly be focused on neighborhood favors. When you're making something and everybody is like, oh my god, that's brilliant, how come nobody ever thought about that before? You definitely feel as though you're on the path to something. Krimmel says, I am less optimistic about it now because I've seen where the sharing economy has gone. Let me ask you this, Williams says, for a drill which by the way now costs $30 and you can get it on Amazon now and have this thing delivered to you in an hour, if you're living in New York City for something worth $30, is it really worth your time to trek potentially 25 minutes to go get something that you spent $15 to use for the day and then have to trek back? For most people on the sharing platforms, the answer was no. The people for whom the answer is yes were unlikely to be using platforms like Snapgoods, which generally attached upper middle class early adopters who were comfortable with technology. Williams had ideas about how to lessen the pain. Maybe he thought he could convince livery drivers to transport goods for a fee when they had empty cars. A great idea, it turns out, that Uber would later embrace. In order to address the problem of more people posting goods than renting them, he refocused the site so that people could advertise the things they wanted. I needed a power drill. Do you know anyone? Turned out to be drastically more shareable than I have a power drill. Eventually, that tool illuminated a need to make targeted outreach across social networks easy, which seemed more promising than Snapgoods. He shifted his attention to creating that technology, today called Node.es, which is spelled KNOD.es, and shut down Snapgoods. He is the managing partner of a strategy and product development consultancy firm called Proof Labs Group. Schwartz moved from Cincinnati, where she had founded Share Some Sugar, to New York, and she slowly stopped answering customer service emails until she shut the site down about 3 years ago. We tried everything: schools, temples, affinity groups, suburbs. Burke says of Neighborough it should work in offices. It doesn't work there either. After he failed his co-founder's challenge to get three of the site's thousands of registered users to make transactions, he moved on to another project. The most successful sharing economy startup ended up being those that made the process as efficient and transactional as possible. What Airbnb did quite well is that the process where you rent a room anywhere is actually quite similar to a hotel, says Kija, the founder of Zillow. For peer-to-peer car rental, it's exactly the same. Kija left Zillow in 2011, 4 years after founding it. Though it exists, it spun off a more successful car lending platform called WeCar.com. Other companies that claim space under the sharing economy umbrella and its halo effect, meanwhile, have transitioned away from that narrative. Lyft may have debuted its services as a more neighborly peer-to-peer version of Uber, encouraging people to greet their drivers with a fist bump, fuzzy pink mustaches, but now it's competing on price instead. Parking Panda once marketed itself as a way to share parking spaces with neighbors, but now many of its shared parking spaces are in restaurants, hotels, commercial garages, and airports. Rent the Runaway successfully rent dresses, but from a warehouse full of 65,000 garments, not from stylish neighbors, and Zipcar, acquired by Avis in 2013, successfully changed the way we rent cars, but we're definitely not meeting each other by doing so. Calling Groupon, Netflix, or Kickstarter a sharing economy company at this point almost sounds absurd. It's not that these tools and sites aren't good services, or that they don't make these things easier. It's rather that they have little to do with the original promise of the sharing economy. Really, it's more of an access economy, a term Williams used from the beginning. We hated that terminology, he says, of the sharing economy, hated it with the heat of 1,000 suns. There's quite a bit more in this article, but I'm not going to read it. I just wanted to read this final little piece on here. Reason being that I've got a sore throat, a bad chest, I need a drink. I spoke for over an hour. I'm pretty much packing up, and I want to finish this last article. So it says, I will never shut it down, ever, says Burke, who now works as a lean startup consultant, but I couldn't just live in Fantasy Town forever. So let me just bring it to this. 7 odd solutions for 7 common economic problems. Could dog poop help communities meet their energy needs? Should the government give signing bonuses to the unemployed people who accept job offers? Would a commuter loyalty program similar to the airlines get more workers to use public transportation? Could cities solve their problems by cutting property tax rates in half? Harebrained, brilliant, or somewhere in between, here are 7 radical solutions suggested recently to address common problems in the United States and around the world. So the problem is ridiculously high, constantly rising property taxes. Solution: cut property tax rates in half over the course of a few years. A debate on this suggestion rages in Baltimore, the only municipality in Maryland to have lost residents over the last decade. Soaring property tax rates, more than double the rate of surrounding countries, have been blamed as main reason for the population decrease. Carl Stokes, councilman and mayoral candidate, has proposed a plan to dramatically lower the city's property tax rates, with the idea that the lower tax rates attract more residents and businesses, making up for the decrease in the individual property tax revenues. The next problem: Not enough commuters using public transport. Create frequent commuter programs that reward loyal passengers in similar fashion to airline reward programs. A Stanford computer scientist tells The Atlantic that such a program, which is being tested in Bangalore and Singapore, would give commuters more incentive to use public transportation rather than their cars, easing congestion on the roads. If higher reward points were given for riding public transit during off-peak hours, as is suggested, the program could also ease congestion on buses and trains as well. Problem: unemployment benefits give some incentive to stay unemployed. A solution: award signing bonuses for unemployed who will find work sooner rather than later. In a Washington Post op-ed, Todd G. Buchholz, an economic advisor to President George H.W. Bush, suggests that the government lure the unemployed back to the workforce by paying out signing bonuses on a sliding scale, with a better payoff for those who find work quicker. The theory is that workers will be more likely to accept jobs, even lower paying jobs they're not too crazy about. If a bonus was thrown into the deal, workers would be more likely to accept jobs. Sorry, I just read that twice. And that the government would ultimately wind up a net winner because it would pay less in the long run and unemployment benefits while also collecting taxes on the wages of workers back in the labour pool. The economy, in theory, would be better off with people back at work, and the proposal would only be in effect while unemployment rates remain over 7.5%. Problems: global poverty. Design and distribute radically affordable products, water delivery systems, and sustainable engineering projects for the other 90% of the world's population who have little access to services common in the US. The Denver Post describes a new exhibit opening tonight at the city's Red Line main gallery, devoted to low-cost technologies and innovations designed to help this other 90% out of poverty. Problem: prisons are expensive to run and ineffective at deterring crime. Solution: give less serious offenders the option of being flogged as a substitute for jail time. A John Jay College of Criminal Justice professor suggests that if flogging returned, the US prison population would drop from 2.3 million to 300,000, saving billions, and that the punishment would not be cruel or unusual, because the criminal would still have the choice of saving time rather than getting whipped. Problem: consistently high jobless rates in the US. Solution: lower the minimum wage or kill it altogether. From Business Week to the Wall Street Journal, the idea seems to be coming up more and more that minimum wage requirements are keeping unemployment rates high. Some economists are suggesting that the minimum wage laws disappear, at least for teenagers who suffer a much lower rate of employment than the general public. But would scrapping the minimum wage or lowering it to, say, $4 an hour for teenagers get the economy humming along again? One University of California Irvine economist who has done research on how minimum wage rules decrease job opportunities for teens and young adults says it's not even in the top of 10 list of how to recover from the Great Recession. And the last one here, a bit of humour. Problem: too much productive dog waste going to waste. Turn the poop abundant at dog parks into energy that lights street lamps. The Arizona Republic, via the Consumerist, reports that Arizona State students hope to design a dog waste digester and install it into a popular dog park. After cleaning up after their dogs, owners would place pulp-filled biodegradable bags into the digester and turn a hand crank. The machine converts the waste into methane gas, which would be the energy source for park lamps. Okay, so that's a similar story to when they were suggesting handing your dead relatives' bodies to be cremated and in a way where it could be, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't really have a word, but recyclable, if that's the word, probably the right fitting word, but there you go. So if, you know, dog waste is the best solution they can come up with, I'm going to pass you over to Stav, because he really wants to talk about more to do with this bit here, global poverty, where radically affordable products and water delivery systems and sustainable engineering projects are needed. So over to Stav, because I do believe he's got a decent solution that has once been used but has since been forgotten. Okay, Stav, over to you.
Yeah, okay, PJ. Yeah, well, thanks for that. I don't know where to recap any of that, but
just move on with what you wanted to show. I mean, I apologise for the people having to listen to my drony voice, which isn't very good today for that, you know, length of time, but I just wanted to get them articles out there, that were all.
yeah, no, and the sharing and that, well, we touched on that before we read that article with Ubuntu and that contributionism and sharing. Why would you own anything when everybody can share? But there you go. A lot of people say, oh, utopia. Well, okay, it is possible. I think we all have it in us individually, apart from the psychopaths and the non-empathetic.
Does the word favourism?
Favour?
Like, favourism, yeah, like when you're doing favours for each other, yeah? Does that actually appear anywhere?
No. Well, because somebody does a
contributionism.
Well, when somebody does a favour, they automatically think they've got to return it. So
no, obviously it's unconditional.
It should. Well, if it's unconditional, then I would call it just, you know, kindness. I don't know.
This is when I shut up for night.
Okay, well, we'll wrap it up because it's been a long evening, and thanks for all the information. Tons of it there, PJ, absolutely tons of it. And there we go. This is an article by Hang the Bankers, and it's relatively, it's only 4 days ago. I don't know when it was legalised, but apparently it is.
Well, if you can't hang them, at least lock them up like Iceland's doing.
Well, I think that would be a light let-off. But anyway, we'll move on. Industrial hemp now legal in North Carolina. Numerous industries would benefit from the industrialization of hemp as they once did in America. And I'm just saying, this is just most people that have looked into alternatives, people that have been, I guess the term, waking up to what the world is really like over the past 10 years, 7 years, 6 years, 3 years, maybe 2 months, whatever. We'll know about the wonders of the hemp plant and what it used to do and what it can do for economies now to get most countries out of stuck. And this is it. Numerous industries would benefit from the industrialization of hemp as they once did in America. But thanks to federal government, this widely diverse crop has been highly underutilized, even despite the fact that it is entirely different than psychoactive marijuana. Was that correct? Oh, well, dope. People tend to call it all sorts of things. Anyway, now in a huge game-changing move for the US, North Carolina has recently legalized the cultivation and manufacturing of industrial hemp. Spring Hope, North Carolina, is one of the only large hemp decortication plants in the US. Decortication is the process of stripping the bark, long fiber, from the stalks, allowing the crop to be better utilized for production. Say hello to more clothing, jewelry, rope, fuel, and much more derived from hemp. The North Carolina plant has been able to process hemp because of hasn't been able to process hemp because of obvious legal issues, though it will now be able to process a whopping 40 million pounds of hemp each year, paving way for long-awaited production and employment opportunities. On October the 31st, 2015, Government Pat McCrory passed Senate Bill 313, allowing farmers in North Carolina to wake up in the morning with a new option for growing crops. Industrial hemp production became legal at the stroke of midnight. The bill passed the House and Senate in late September by a vote of 101 to 7 and 42 to 2 respectively. It has been until just recently awaiting Governor Pat McCrory to sign it into law. The North Carolina General Assembly finds and declares that it is in the best interest of the citizens of North Carolina to promote and encourage the development of an industrial hemp industry in the state in order to expand employment, promote economic activity, and provide opportunities to small farmers for an environmentally sustainable and profitable use of croplands that might otherwise be lost to agricultural production. The purpose of this article are to establish an agricultural pilot program for the cultivation of industrial hemp in the state, to provide for reporting on the program by the growers and processors for agricultural or other research, and to pursue any federal permits or waivers necessary to allow industrial hemp to be grown in the state. Currently, the United States is the #1 importer of hemp products in the world. We have to import it because we can't grow it and produce it here. So we spend millions as a whole bringing it in from other countries who know better than to ban such a valuable crop. What makes hemp so valuable? Its uses are virtually endless. Here is a start. Okay, this is just the main, but it can be a hell of a lot more. Paper, plastics, clothing, jewelry, rope, building materials, cooking, hemp oil, medicine, food. It won't get you high because it doesn't have a high THC level. It's very most of it is below 0.05%. It's ridiculously low. Skincare products, animal and bird feed, animal bedding, water and soil purification, weed control, clean fuel. I mean, it's a fantastic biofuel. That's much better than corn, and it's clean. Yeah, and you could use that for power stations and all the whole lot. You know, no problems. So it's a green energy, and it's inexhaustible because if you grow plenty of it, no problem. And all the other things you can do, and that's just a tiny list of what you can do. You can pretty much do everything with them, that any plastics or modern building materials, clothing, everything. And so anyway, it's just now North Carolina can show the country how to reutilize an infinitely old crop that once helped run America, and it was, you know. And this country could do the same here. I mean, basically, going back over to what you were saying, PJ, about, fiat currencies, the world monetary system, blah, blah, blah. I mean, to go to a moneyless society, I think is what they're aiming at, basically, because this system cannot be resolved. Austerity certainly won't even do an ounce drop to it. And also, they cannot, it's mathematically impossible to pay off the debt. So all they're doing is they're killing time to take you over to a credit system with no cashless society and whatever. So that all they're doing is just keep pumping the cheap money in and keeping the interest low. And the only people who are getting fat are the fat cats, as we know. But this product, I would say, you know, get rid of the banks, have a state run to start with as an interim before you could go over to a cashless society or a moneyless society where you don't use money. There's got to be an interim period, and I would say you have a state-run bank that prints its own interest-free currency, and you could get something like industrial hemp going. There's so much set aside and corruption with the EU system of set aside and the rest of it with the agricultural policy, whatever it's called. Yeah. This can be put into process by scattering literally the seeds on the ground. You don't even have to sow them down to any depth. It's that ridiculous to grow, easy to grow, and it would provide jobs. It would provide clothing. It would provide clean fuel. It would provide water and soil purification. It's got a lot of skincare products. Medicinally, it's very powerful. It's the best natural. So I've read anti-inflammatory. And forget aspirin, forget paracetamol, forget the, them type of things. This has got a very powerful anti-inflammatory, which is obviously anybody knows about inflammation. It is pain. That's what pain is, and this is anti-inflammatory. So it's got the lot in it for one poultry plant that you could grow in an industrial way. I would dare say not even a third or a quarter of the agricultural land that's left in the UK. It'd completely eradicate all the monetary problems and debt and all the rest of it within a very short period of time. I think so, and a lot of people that think like me and you, PJ, have said the same thing about it. And I just wanted to bring this article up tonight to finish with, to say that North Carolina can see it, although it's being eased in a small way. But really, basically, that's what I would say. A state-run bank, get rid of the Ponzi scheme. It's
Bradbury Pound, is that what you're thinking of?
Pound, yeah, anything like that, and interest-free, print its own interest-free money, and get the country back to some type of, working economy that people can work together. Forget the rest of the world. Forget the rest of the world and all the rest of the bullshit trade where consumerism is completely nuts. Buying everything, like buying a power drill, for crying out loud. Nobody hardly uses it, like you say, 10 minutes for the whole life. They get stuck in the shed. No one uses it. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. So, this is just one of that could just do it on its own. That plant could completely rebuild this country, and I'm not the only one saying that. There's a lot of other people saying the same. I thought I'd bring this article up as it's relatively new, and one state in America's going ahead. It's not cannabis. It's industrial hemp, and that's what it's all about. And it's full of the dietary benefits from it. It's full of everything. I wish we had Book on actually tonight, because he probably knows a lot more about the dietary side of it. But there we go. So yeah, I think that about covers it from me, PJ. Hopefully we've covered a bit of information for a few people who's stuck with us all this time.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah, it's very simple. It's very simple.
Says the man whilst banging his head on the wall.
Well, it's wake up, people. I mean, Oh, by the way, I was sharing very quickly. I was saying to Nikki while you was reading the article there. This is something we used to do when I was on a housing estate, council housing estate in the 70s. Neighbours used to knock on each other's door. Have you got some milk? Have you got some sugar? Have you got some coffee? Have you got any bread or anything like that? And my family, my mother used to say, oh yeah, yes, I've got. And they used to share it. Now, the neighbour would come back another day and say, oh, there's your milk and sugar. My mum used to say, no, I've got plenty, have it on me, whatever, sharing it. And most neighbours worked like that. You never had to, people felt duty bound to, in a way, because of neighbourly, to offer it back, but nobody really ever took it back, because we were a community and we shared, working class community that shared, and we policed our own estate. We didn't need a bobby. You saw him now and then walking the beat.
Yeah.
We used to take care of our own community. Yeah, there was the winter of discontent and all that stuff, and yeah, you could see the problems, but a lot of it was, all of it was brought about by the governments and the corruption and all the rest of it.
Well, I was just going to say, Andy, that, it sounds good to me. I'm quite willing to wake up to such an idea, but don't speak too loudly, because you could wake up, Margaret Thatcher again. We don't want that.
No, I had, yeah, let's just say, over a decade we had of her, and it was a decade too much. And basically, yeah, you can see the results today. And yeah, the country, every country can do their own thing. Some people say, well, it's protectionism, although you're going in on yourself. Well, there isn't anything left to do, because unless something like this happens, then we're going to be heading for some really, really bad times. And it'll always be us. It'll always be the people that are not rich that will pick up the tab and will suffer from it. So it always has been like that. But years past, even in my time, at least the working class people stuck together, something they don't seem to do now. Everybody seems to think that this middle class bullshit. I saw a thing with an interview of a guy, and I can't remember, it was Newsnight or something, quite a while ago, when we had a television and we were converting off of the bullshit. This guy stopped a guy in the street, and he said, hello. He said, what do you do for a living? He said, well, I'm a taxi driver. He said, what would you class yourself? He said, oh, middle class. Right, okay. He went down anyway, asked 2 or 3 people, shop system, middle class. He went to this guy and he said, well, I'm unemployed, I haven't got a job. He said, well, what sort of class would you class yourself? He said, middle class. The guy never even had a job. The guy never had a job.
Probably because there's no middle class under why everybody's saying that.
Exactly. This bullshit of middle classism that Thatcher brought, it's old out. It was never a middle class. It was false anyway. And we're reaping, well, say, you can see what's happened now. And they've still got this bullshit about, oh, I'm doing all right, Jack. No, you're not doing all right. You live off debt. You live off of things you can't afford, like it said in the bullshit economy from Hang the Bankers, basically. So wake the hell up and let's get sorted. Let's get cracking. I mean, this is your kids' futures. You've got to think about it. If you're young families, think about it. Get sorted. Anyway, enough from me. That's my bit.
Yeah, enough from me. My voice is dying, so until next Sunday, that's all from us. But do take care, and we'll catch you next week. Bye for now.
Cheerio.